Maybe he doesn't want the American people, all of you watching tonight, to know that he's paid nothing in federal taxes.
That makes me smart.
Well, that's an exchange from Monday's debate, which has new resonance after the New York Times reports Trump took a $1 billion loss in his 1995 returns and may not have paid any federal income tax for up to 18 years. Time now for our Sunday group. Michael Needham, head of Heritage Action for America. Bob Woodward from the Washington Post, author of The Last of the President's Men, which is coming out in paperback next week. Julie Pace, who covers the White House and the campaign for the Associated Press, and Washington Examiner contributor Lisa Boothe. Well, Lisa, Mitt Romney, as we all remember, got hammered in 2012 when he put out his tax return, and it turned out he'd paid an effective tax rate of 14%. What do you think the reaction is going to be to the idea, the possibility that Donald Trump paid no federal income taxes for years?
I don't think it hurts him as much as it did with Mitt Romney. I mean, Donald Trump has been very honest about the fact that he's taken advantage of the system. He even mentioned it in the first debate. He's also said that he tries to pay as little taxes as possible. And let's be honest about both of these candidates. Neither one of them are candidates of the people. Donald Trump is a billionaire. Hillary Clinton has lived in a rarefied world as First Lady. She's admitted to not driving a car for 18 years. She's made, collectively with Bill Clinton, over $100 million from paid speeches to the likes of Goldman Sachs. So neither candidate is really a candidate of the people.
But let me turn to you, Michael, because first of all, we should point out that Trump, according to the Times, did nothing illegal, that if he had this kind of huge loss, you're allowed to carry that over to shield income in following years. But the argument that Claire McCaskill makes, here's a guy who says he's the champion of the working man, and yet he's paying no taxes for years and years.
Well, first of all, we don't know whether he paid taxes or not, and there's many forms of taxation.
I will say he did make a statement that was conspicuous in not denying it.
Right. So the federal government in 1995 brought in $1.4 trillion of tax dollars. This year it brought in $3 trillion. There's plenty of tax revenue. The problem is that Washington, D.C. squanders it. It's inefficient. It's corrupt. If you don't like the manner in which the distribution of the tax system, then we need a new tax code. And I think if you look at these two candidates, Hillary Clinton has a tax plan. It keeps the currently very complex tax system, 8 different tax brackets, actually adds a 9th tax bracket on top of that with a surcharge. And Donald Trump has an incredible pro-growth tax plan that's been written by my colleague Steve Moore at the Heritage Foundation, by Art Laffer, by Larry Kudlow. And so if you don't like the distribution of who's paying what, the problem isn't Donald Trump. The problem is Washington, D.C. The problem is the Capitol building. And that's where we need new ideas put in.
So Julie Pace, I got to ask you, are Republicans going to be able to, and the Trump campaign, be able to sell that argument? Here's an argument. I know the tax game, and if there's anybody who can fix it, it's me.
Well, I think that's going to be their argument. It's not a bad argument. The one thing I just keep thinking about is this really just argues for transparency in presidential elections. If Donald Trump had put this information out himself in, say, May of this year, he could have dealt with any negative coverage. He could have answered these questions. If he put out the rest of his tax returns, we would know whether he was paying federal income taxes or not. And I think what you're going to see the Clinton campaign do is not just focus on what we learn from these new documents, but try to use it to paint a broader picture of Donald Trump, someone who is running on his business record but suffered $1 billion loss, someone who may not have been paying contractors, people who worked for him, and yet isn't paying potentially income taxes. And I think that could be damaging when we're talking about going after undecided voters 5 weeks from Election Day.
Then there is Hillary Clinton, who certainly acted after the Monday debate as if she was the clear winner. Here she is.
Did anybody see that debate last night? Oh, yes.
She was enjoying herself. Bob, you say that you were on the road this week in North Carolina. You talked to a lot of people, and that kind of, I think it's fair to say, gloating didn't set too well.
Yeah, she won the debate. I think there's universal agreement on that. I guess Trump would not agree, but she really did. But that clip shows this kind of self-congratulation, this self-satisfaction. And as we know, and as we try to teach our children, when you win something, don't gloat. Humility works. And the problem for her is this feeds the notion that she's in this for herself. There was, I mean, you see that she was overjoyed with what she did. Fine, take a victory lap, but there is, something like that doesn't get dialed back, and it probably should.
Lisa, I mean, it is worth remembering, and I think at least the polls indicate, and the Fox poll had it 3-1, 60% to 20%, that Clinton won the debate. She apparently got a bump, not a huge bump, but a bump in the polls. But there's still lots of vulnerabilities out there for Trump to go after. I mean, people still have considerable questions about Hillary Clinton.
Well, absolutely. And I think Hillary Clinton's biggest problem right now is she represents the status quo. What is she going to do differently than we haven't seen for the past 8 years? And if you look at CBS's battleground polling, 55% of voters want big changes in terms of the economy, in terms of politics. You look at Quinnipiac, which has asked the question about, do you want changes to states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Florida? 70% of voters in those states want radical change. There is no bigger disruptor in this election than Donald Trump. He's running as the outsider, and there's information there and data points to show that voters want the change. Now he just needs to answer the question about temperament, which I don't think he did himself any favors during the first debate, but I think he still has time to address that with 36 days out.
Well, I want to just follow up on that with you when we've got to move on to the next segment. That's a very strong argument that you make, and I think that's why a lot of people thought he did very well, if not won, the first half hour of the debate. The argument, you've been here for 20 years or 30 years, and you haven't done anything about this, I'll change it. And then he continues to talk for a week about Miss Universe.
Right, which is complexing. It doesn't make sense, and perplexing, rather, and he shouldn't have done that. I mean, the problem is he went right in and took the bait of Hillary Clinton. They had an ad cut. They were ready to go with this messaging strategy, and he took it. What he should have done is taken all those opportunities instead of defending his business practices, instead of going after Miss Universe. What he should have done is taken those opportunities to attack her on Benghazi, attack her on her private email server, which draws into question her own judgment and her own temperament, attack her on the Clinton Foundation, and use all those opportunities to go after her vulnerabilities, which there are plenty of.
Well, as we always say, reporters are all frustrated campaign advisors, and we all, if they just listen to us. All right, we've got to take a break here.